Richard Bloom, production designer for Welcome to Chippendales. I think most people are familiar with the modern Chippendales and the Vegas show and all that. But this is an origin story and a tragic story at that, and set in the 80s. So how much did you know about this before the show?
Well, I actually knew quite a bit, thanks to my mother. My mother's a big fan of true crime and these murder shows. So I think I'd seen either a podcast or a Dateline about it. When I first went in to pitch the show, I had never worked with Rob Siegel and Jenny Connor, the two showrunners, and I got the script and I went in, and my biggest concern was, whether or not we were going to be, taking some artistic license or not with the show, because ultimately, like, it's a heart-wrenching American dream gone wrong, but and that was sort of the first thing that I went in. And once I knew that they were on board and they wanted to take as many liberties as possible to tell the story of these basically these two men who have very different dreams, and egos get in the way and it goes horribly wrong. Once I knew that we could kind of really latch onto that, and I had some freedom not to just recreate exactly things as they looked at the time, I got really excited about it. I mean, obviously it's set against such a surreal backdrop. The guys are, the dancing is so much fun, but there's a really dark, sinister undertone that creeps up on you, throughout the season, and it spirals out of control.
Mm-hmm. So I guess your mom was excited that you were working on this.
Yeah, she was pretty excited. I think everybody was. I mean, maybe not my sister so much, because my nieces probably won't be able to watch the show. Yeah. But so with the two, ultimately the story, for the people who don't know, Steve Banerjee, played by Kumail Nanjiani, he never had the intention of starting a male dance club, but as it goes on, yeah, no, definitely, and as it goes on, he becomes so he's driven by his ego, whereas this other character, Nick Denoya, played by Murray Bartlett, he also is chasing his American dream, but it's more about artistic freedom. So and as they splinter off, there's jealousy, and then ultimately things go horribly awry. So I knew that with Steve's character, like, there were going to be he's very money driven. I knew there was going to be a lot of scenes in his office. So the very first thing that I pitched was a two-story club, which was not how it was in Culver City originally. But I wanted to bring the nightclub into the office. So we have a lot of sequences where, and speaking with our DP Paolo Hodobro as well, like, we wanted to be able to bring the club in and bring the swirl in, and as things go in, it becomes more and more, there's this backdrop behind him, that there's always this movement, and there's through the disco balls and the light array. And I wanted it to feel, a bit surreal, because the story is pretty surreal. He meets his future wife at the bar, while right behind him there's men dancing, and the whole thing is tonally a little bit off.
I was wondering if the second floor was real, because I was like, that's really complex, but then it also makes sense when you describe, because like he is just so power hungry, like he wants to be number one, and like this
so we had one big stage out in Chatsworth, where we built the club on one side of the stage, and then the other side of the stage we would always have like 4 or 5 sets that were constantly being ripped down and built up. When I first signed onto the show, and that was one of the challenges, actually, to watch the progression of the club. The show goes from 1979 through the 80s. And we wanted to we wanted to feel that without being too trapped in time by the real events. There are certain key elements that happen. The famous Chippendales calendars, which we recreated, and we did our version that'll put you in a place when the 1982 calendar is happening and the 1984 calendar happening. And those were just like a blast to do. We had 3 graphic designers on, Steve Simon, Dorothy Street, and Mark Larkin, and recreating those with our prop master Jamie and Lynette McCown, our set decorator, were just super fun. And so you see this club progress over time as more and more neon comes in, and the advertisements
like lights and
change.
mirrors in the back.
Yeah. And then full scale, like glowing posters of the guys and all that. But then in the juxtaposition of that, Nick splinters off and he goes to New York, and he's at a real crossroads in his life. So he's coming out of the closet. He's searching for sort of artistic, some sort of artistic, basically like becoming great
like
and ready
expression
world.
and
Exactly. So we started him out. I started him out. We built him a mid-century house where he was living, because it's 1979. He's sort of living in the past. And then when he transitions to New York, I wanted to go into an Art Deco inspired world, which was also really leans heavily into the 80s Deco thing, and then see that sort of infuse into his performances, because basically there's a New York Chippendales and LA Chippendales at that point.
The New York Chippendales stage is completely different because it's like it's not a circular stage. It's just like
it's like a theater,
section.
Yeah, he's like a Broadway guy, and that's his dream. So he takes the club to a whole different level. And, he's the real reason that that went on, and then that doesn't go so well with Nick.
I love that scene because we see the full Hunkenstein number with like the laboratory set. So how much fun was it to design that set?
Oh, it was so fun. We block shot the whole, we had 4 different directors, 2 episodes at a time. And I knew that was coming. And Nisha Ganatra shot that episode. And it was just such a fun time working with the choreographer and everyone, just like to put together that set and to make it. And then what you probably haven't seen in the next episode, the sets transform, and we really start to show the juxtaposition between the LA club, where Steve is spending just bare bones to keep packing the house, versus Nick, who's going all out and ultimately takes the show on the road. And we see the road tour as well, which was a lot of fun.
What do you have to keep in mind when you're designing a set for dance numbers? Because there are a lot of wide shots. We have to see the whole like choreography, full bodies and everything.
Yeah. Well, we worked pretty closely with Michelle Johnson, who was the choreographer, in terms of knowing early on what the theme of the dances were, and how we wanted and what the action needed to happen. But yeah, I mean, obviously safety is a huge concern, but then also you want to have it be as dynamic and hilarious as possible, and give the directors that are stepping in, because a lot of times the design is happening prior to when our each director was prepping. So a lot of that was figured out, and we would always want to give them the best chance at a dynamic dance scene, as possible. And also I would like to also mention COVID, which was a crazy thing in the show, because we're at the height of COVID. We have 200 extras screaming every night.
I was wondering, because like the club is packed.
Yeah, it's packed, and that was tricky, because TV is a kind of a race to begin with, and I knew that this one was going to have some real things that could throw us off. So trying to get not only ahead of just the regular pace of television, but also being ready. And with only one stage, that became really challenging. We did have a couple of shutdowns. We had one shutdown for 10 days, which caused us having to take the club all the way to, the end moment, and then bring it all the way back to the beginning moment, and then back again. So that made for a logistical sort of nightmare, but still really fun.
You have to adapt, yeah. So, I want to mention Steve's mansion, which was humongous, but also just so ostentatious, because it fits with his personality, that ego, like he just wants to be famous and wealthy. So was that a real mansion?
It's actually, so our stages were in Chatsworth, and that is not far away. That was actually a really great find by our location team, led by Eric Fairstein. And I fell in love with it the second I saw it. In fact, we had scouted a house further down in this one gated community. And as we were driving out, we stopped, and I was like, we got to get into that house, because you could kind of see behind the gate. I was like, that looks really interesting. And sure enough, it just worked out. It was a really, really, it was a blessing, that house.
Yeah, because it was so wide and expanded. Like when you get to the backyard and the pool area, I was like, okay, this is bigger than I thought.
Yeah. Well, and that was important to Rob. He really wanted to show that jump, because basically we see the guys we see Steve, and as he's spending so little on the club, we're seeing his life just sort of exorbitantly go up, which puts all this pressure on him, even more pressure on him. When a couple of things go wrong, it makes him to the point of where he, it drives him to insanity and to a point of,
and it's also a great juxtaposition with his the flashback, or not flashback, or flashback, but when he goes to India early in the season.
And when I signed up, I thought we were going to be traveling. I thought we were going to do a little time in New York and maybe actually shoot some in India. And then obviously with COVID and with our budget restrictions, we ended up doing it all in and around Chatsworth. So that was a challenge, but also a really fun challenge, recreating Bombay on the streets of Los Angeles.
Do you have a favorite performance number from the show?
I do, and I think it's towards the very end. So I'll save that one. But there's some good
Everyone
ones.
will keep an eye out for it. So.
Yeah, there's some good ones in every episode, and but towards the very end, our last director, Richard Shepard, really did some fun stuff.
Well, Richard, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time, and you get to stay on because everyone's back.